Event listeners. JavaScript comes with plenty of events you can use, but we'll be talking about the click event and the unchange event because they are the events you'll be using most. The click event. This event adds an onClick handler to an HTML element. For example, when a user clicks on a particular button, then this event gets fired. We also have the unchange event, which handles changes in elements. For example, if a user types his name on an input field, this event can handle changes the user make on that input field. To simply use any of these events listed, we target the HTML element we want to add the event and the type of event we want to use. The next is a callback function who gets executed anytime the event is fired. So now let's jump right into the code and let me show you how it's done. So guys, we have this simple HTML setup over here. So we have an input field with an ID of input, and we have a div with an ID of display, and a button over here with an ID of button. So now what we are going to do is, when a user tries to type something inside the input field, we'll grab that value and we'll simply display it over here. That's our ID with the display when the user clicks on this button with an ID of button. So if I open my browser, we'll have this simple setup over here. So now this is the input and this is our button. So now I'll head over to my code and I'll go to my JavaScript file. So now the first thing is to create a variable that will hold our value. So simply create a variable with, so I'll call it text and I'll set it equals to an empty string for now. So now the next thing is to target our input and grab our value from our input. So we'll use the document.query selector. So since it's an ID, I'll pass the hash, then I'll type the ID, and the ID there is input. So now add an event listener, and the event will be a change event. So I'll type change. So the next is our callback function. So I'll bring our callback function over here. So the callback function here is an arrow function. So you can see the event listener takes two arguments, and the first one is for your event, and our event is a change event, and the second one is for your callback function. So now I'll pass an E here, so that we'll use this E to target our input value. So I'll use the E.target.value. So now I'm grabbing the value with this E. So now I'll set our text over there to be equals to that value. So now our text is equals to that value we are grabbing from the input. So if I save this, so now let me just copy this and I'll bring it down for our button. So I'll simply change this input to button, and our event will be a click event. So when a user click on the button, so now we don't need this E anymore. So simple delete this. So now let's alert our value first. So I'll simply alert our text. That's when the user click on our button. So if I save this and then I open my browser and then I refresh, so now let's write something over here. So let me just type. So now if I click on this show content, then we'll get whatever the user types. So now the next thing is to target our display element and just change the inner HTML to that input. So if I head over here, then I'll use this. Let me just copy this over here. So I'll paste this and I'll change this to display. So now we'll use the inner HTML and set it equals to the text over here. So now the inner HTML of the element with an ID of display will be set to that text over here, and the text is simply equals to our input value. So if I save this, then I refresh, so we're small. So if I simply write something here and then I click on this show content, then we'll get our input value back. So guys,